My name is Tessa Ridgway, and I was 26 the night my parents took me to dinner to inform me, between the appetizer and the entree, that the family had voted to remove me. My mother said the word voted without any apparent awareness that families do not generally hold elections, and she said it with the brisk, practical warmth she used when she was reading out the agenda for a parent-teacher association meeting. My father slid a small leather folder across the linen and explained that the paperwork had already been filed, that everything was in order, that I was not to worry about administrative steps because they had handled them all. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I did not, for the first 60 seconds, say anything at all. But here is what neither of them realized as they watched my face for the collapse they had clearly been planning around. 8 months before that dinner, on a wet Wednesday afternoon I had not been expecting anything from, I had opened a certified letter at my kitchen counter and learned the name of the woman who had given birth to me. I had been in correspondence with her ever since, and on the night of that dinner, by my own quiet arrangement with the restaurant's hostess, that woman and her mother and her younger son were seated 4 tables behind my mother's chair, drinking iced tea and eating a shared appetizer, watching the entire performance unfold from across the room, while my mother, who had her back to them the whole time, had absolutely no idea they were there. What happened when she finally turned around is the reason I am sitting here, 6 years later, telling you any of this. Before we go on, I want to ask you to tap the like button below, and if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, please do, because stories like this only travel as far as you carry them. Drop a comment and tell me which town or city you are listening from tonight, because the geography of who finds these stories never stops surprising me. And now, let me take you back to a quiet, upholstered restaurant in a suburb north of Portland, Oregon, and to the dinner my mother spent 6 weeks engineering, and to the manila envelope I carried into that restaurant in the bottom of my work bag, the contents of which she had no reason to suspect existed. The restaurant my mother chose was called Ardennes, and it was the kind of place she never took me to. I want you to understand that immediately, because the choice itself was the first piece of evidence that something was being staged. Ardennes was the restaurant my mother took her important friends to when she wanted to impress them in a careful, controlled way that did not look like she was impressing them. It had heavy wool drapes on the windows and small individual lamps on each table, and a host who kept your coat for you in a small closet near the entrance, rather than handing it to a hook. My mother had taken me there exactly twice in my life, both times for occasions she had wanted witnesses for. My college graduation dinner when I was 21, where she had spent most of the meal on her phone, and an aunt's 70th birthday when I was 23, where I had been seated at the far end of the table, next to a relative I had not been introduced to. The third time my mother brought me to Ardennes, on a Thursday evening in early November of my 26th year. She wore a navy blue silk blouse and a single string of pearls, and the small gold watch she only wore for things she considered formal. And she had reserved the table under her own name rather than mine. And there was no card on the chair, and no flowers on the table, and nothing visible on the white linen except 2 folded napkins and the small lit lamp. My father sat across from her in the dark charcoal suit he wore to funerals. He had not said more than 4 sentences in the car on the drive over. He had asked me twice whether the heat was on too high, and I had said it was fine both times, and the second time he had reached over and adjusted it anyway, which is the only language my father has ever spoken when he is nervous. My mother, who has never in her life been visibly nervous, had spent the drive humming under her breath in a way that meant she was rehearsing. I want to tell you what I knew, walking into that restaurant on that Thursday evening, that they did not know I knew. I knew that for almost a year, my mother had been very gradually removing me from things. Not all at once, not visibly, but the way someone disassembles a piece of furniture in the next room while you are eating dinner, so that by the time you go to sit on it, the chair has already been gone for some time. I knew that the Christmas before, my brother Asher and his wife Mira had received, between them, 4 physical Christmas presents at my parents' house, and that I had received a check for $200 in a Hallmark card with my name spelled correctly and the word love scratched out and rewritten because my mother had originally written something else. I knew that my mother had not invited me to my Aunt Patrice's 75th birthday lunch at the country club in June, which I had only learned about 3 weeks after the fact, when Patrice herself called me and asked, very carefully, whether I had been told anything about it. And when I said no, she'd been quiet on the line for a long time and then changed the subject. I knew that the family text thread, which had included me since I was 16, had gone unusually quiet in the months leading up to that dinner, and that when I had attempted twice to send messages to it, the responses I had received had been the brief, polite kind people send to someone they have stopped intending to keep replying to. I knew, in other words, that something was being prepared. I did not yet know exactly what shape it would take, but I had been a children's services caseworker for the state of Oregon for 4 years by then, and I had learned, very early in that work, to recognize the particular temperature change that comes over a household when the adults have decided to remove a child and have not yet told the child. The signs are small, and they are unmistakable, and they are the same in every kind of family. My parents' household had been giving off those signs since the previous February. I want to tell you briefly what kind of household I had grown up in, because without that, the next part of the evening will not make any sense. I was the second child of Lawrence and Cynthia Ridgway, both retired educators, both proud members of a long-settled family in the Willamette Valley with a great many cousins. My older brother Asher had been born to them when my mother was 29, and I had been adopted into the family 3 years later when my mother was 32, through a private placement my parents almost never discussed, and which I, when I had asked about it in late adolescence, had been told was, quote, an ordinary procedural matter that should not be made into a thing. My parents had told me I was adopted when I was 9, in a single, brief conversation at the kitchen table that my mother had treated more or less the way she treated explaining how a checking account worked, which is to say, with a flat informational neutrality designed to discourage follow-up questions. I had asked 1 or 2 follow-up questions anyway. My mother had answered them with a small, tight smile and the phrase, "You are our daughter, Tessa. That is all that matters." Which is the sentence a great many adoptive parents say with sincerity, and which a great many other adoptive parents say as a closing argument designed to make the topic stop. My mother had been delivering closing arguments since I was old enough to speak. I do not want to make my childhood sound worse than it was. My parents fed me, they housed me, they paid for the half of my undergraduate degree my own scholarships did not cover, and they paid for it from their own savings. And I am not going to pretend they did not. They came to one of my 4 piano recitals in middle school, which is one more than they came to of my soccer games, of which there were over 100. They were not cruel to me. They were, I think, doing what they understood adoption to be, which was an act of formal generosity that imposed an obligation on the child to be uncomplicated in return. I was not uncomplicated. I was, even as a small child, a kid who asked too many questions, who noticed too many things, who could not be relied upon, my mother said when she thought I could not hear her, to fit in with her sister's children. My brother Asher fit in. Asher had been raised inside the same household, but treated as the load-bearing wall of the family's future, the one who would inherit the name and the goodwill and the small, careful network of regional connections my parents had spent 4 decades building. Asher had not had to do anything to earn that position. He had merely had to exist, and to look like our father, which he did, and to want what our parents wanted for him, which he did. By the time I was 26, Asher was 31, an associate at a regional accounting firm, married to a woman my mother had introduced him to, the father of a 1-year-old daughter named Hattie, and the unquestioned center of my mother's actual emotional life. I was not. I had never been. I had stopped pretending otherwise around the age of 17, and I had moved out of the house at 18. and I had built, very carefully, across the 8 years since, a small, steady, honest life of my own that did not require my parents' permission and did not, I had told myself at 24, require their love. The only person in the household who had ever made me feel like a daughter and not a project was my grandmother on my father's side, my Nana Pearl Ridgway. She was the matriarch on the Ridgway side of the family, a small woman with sharp blue eyes and an extraordinary garden, and a temper she had earned the right to over 81 years. She had loved me, without footnotes, from the day I had been brought home. She had not loved me more than Asher. She had loved me equally to Asher, which, in the context of our household, had felt to me like being loved more, because nobody else had managed equal. She used to say a sentence to me when I was small and crying in her kitchen because some cousin had said something cutting at a family gathering that I have carried with me into every difficult conversation I have ever had since. She used to take my chin in her small gardener's hand, and she used to look me in the eye, and she used to say, "Tessa, you are not a guest in this family. You are not on probation in this family. You belong here the way the porch belongs to the house. Anyone who tells you otherwise is mistaken about which one of you is actually a Ridgway." She would then make me an open-faced cheese sandwich on the brown bread she baked herself, and she would let me stay up an hour past my bedtime watching old films on her small television. Nana Pearl had died of pancreatic cancer when I was 23, after a fast 6-month illness, and I had given the eulogy at her funeral. And within 4 months of her funeral, my parents had quietly sold their small, ranch-style home of 31 years and moved into the much larger Cape Cod on Aldgate Lane that had been in the Ridgway family for 2 generations, the one my grandmother had lived in until her last illness sent her into hospice care. I had not, at the time of the move, thought very much about it. I had been grieving. My parents had told me only that there had been a generous arrangement made in Nana Pearl's will, and that they would now be the ones living in the family house, and that they hoped I would still come by for Sunday dinner, which I did, for a while, until the temperature in the house began to shift the following spring, and the Sunday invitations began to dry up, and the family text thread began to go quiet, and the November dinner at Ardennes was set on the calendar. The very last thing my grandmother had ever said to me, on the second to last day of her life, when I had been sitting beside her hospice bed, holding her hand and reading her a magazine article she had asked for, was a single sentence I had not understood at the time, and which had only made sense to me much later. She had opened her eyes, very briefly, and looked at me, and said, in a voice that had gone thin but had still been entirely her own, "Tessa, my love, make sure you read your own paperwork. Promise me." I had assumed she meant her own paperwork, the estate she was leaving behind. I had told her, "I promise, Nana," and she had closed her eyes again and slept. She had died the next afternoon. I had not, in the months that followed, thought to read any paperwork. I had thought there was no paperwork to read. I want to walk you through the 8 months before that dinner, because it was in those 8 months that everything I needed to survive Ardennes arrived in my mailbox, one piece at a time, in envelopes I did not know I had been waiting for. In March, almost a year and a half after my grandmother's funeral, the state of Oregon, for unrelated administrative reasons connected to a backlog of older adoption records, mailed out a routine notice to a long list of adult adoptees informing them that their original birth certificates were now available upon written request for a small administrative fee. I received the notice on a Tuesday. I sat on it for about 3 weeks. Then on a Saturday in early April, with no fanfare and no preparation and no real expectation that anything would come of it, I filled out the form, wrote the check for $11, and dropped it in a public mailbox on the corner of my street. I had registered 2 months earlier with the state's Mutual Consent Reunion Registry, which is the system through which biological parents and adult adoptees can each indicate their willingness to be contacted by the other, and which produces a match only when both parties have separately, voluntarily signed up. I had signed up almost as an afterthought, 3 months after I turned 26. On the same Saturday morning, I had finally cleared out the small box of letters and photographs Nana Pearl had left me. I had not told anyone in my family. I had not told anyone in any family. I had checked the box, paid the small fee, and forgotten about it. The certified letter arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in late April. I want to tell you exactly what it said because the precise wording of it has stayed with me. The letter was from the state registry, and it informed me in 2 careful, neutral paragraphs that a match had been confirmed between my registration and a separate registration filed by my birth mother, a woman named Marisol Cárdenas, born in 1974 in Salem, Oregon, who had indicated her willingness to be contacted and who had been registered with the state's reunion system, the letter noted, with a small administrative apology, since 2004. She had been waiting for 19 years. The letter included her current mailing address, with her express written permission to share it, and a separate, small handwritten note, in her own hand, on a single sheet of pale blue stationery, which she had asked the state to forward to me along with the official notification. The handwritten note said, "Tessa, I have thought about you on the 11th of every March for 26 years, which is your birthday, and which I have never spent doing anything except remembering the morning you were born. I would like very much to meet you, on any terms you set. If you do not want to meet, that is also a kind of answer, and I will accept it. There is no version of this in which I am owed anything by you. I am writing because I want you to know I am here. Yours, Marisol Cárdenas." She had signed it. She had not pressured. She had not asked for a reply by any specific date. She had simply, after 19 years, made herself findable. I did not write back immediately. I sat with the letter for 4 days. I read it perhaps 30 times. On the 5th day, I wrote her a short, careful reply in my own hand. We began to correspond. Over the next several weeks, the correspondence accelerated into emails, and then into telephone calls, and then, in mid-June, into a meeting at a small cafe in a town halfway between her city and mine. She was 49 years old. She had given birth to me at 23, while she was in her last year of a community college nursing program, and she had placed me for adoption through a private agency under what she now described, very carefully, as significant family pressure from her own mother. She was a registered nurse. She had not married. She had one other child, a son named Mateo, who was 19, and who lived with her in the small house she had bought 10 years earlier in a working-class neighborhood in Salem. Her own mother, Rosa Cárdenas, was 76, lived 4 blocks away from Marisol in the same neighborhood, had spent 4 decades working at a commercial laundry that had finally closed in 2019, and had spent the last 19 years, Marisol told me in our second meeting, in a state of slowly worsening regret for the decision she had pressed her daughter to make. Rosa Cárdenas, Marisol told me in our third meeting, had spent every one of the last 19 Marches lighting a small candle in her kitchen on the 11th and praying, the same prayer each year, that the granddaughter she had insisted her daughter give up would, one day, find her way back. I met Rosa Cárdenas in person for the first time in mid-July at her small kitchen table in the small house 4 blocks from Marisol's, with the candle for that year already long extinguished and a fresh box of matches on the windowsill. She did not cry when she met me. She held my face in her 2 small worn hands and said, in slightly accented English, "You are here. That is enough. Thank you for coming. I do not need anything else." She made me an open-faced cheese sandwich on dense, dark bread she had baked herself. I had not thought, until I bit into that sandwich, that 2 grandmothers on 2 continents of my life had been making me almost exactly the same sandwich, and that this was perhaps not a coincidence, but a kind of small, private message from the universe about who I had always belonged to. I want to tell you about Mateo, my younger half-brother, because his role in what happened later mattered. He was 19, a first-year community college student studying mechanical drafting, a kind, slightly serious young man with my own thoughtful pause before answering questions, and a faint resemblance around the eyes to a photograph of Marisol's father I had seen in a frame in Rosa's living room. He sent me, within a week of our first meeting, a text message that said only, "I have wanted a sister for 19 years. I am sorry it took so long. Can I take you to a coffee place near my school next Saturday?" I had said yes. He had taken me to a small coffee shop near his community college and had asked me, very seriously, what kinds of things sisters did, because he had no frame of reference, and he wanted me to tell him so that he could start doing them. I had told him, also very seriously, that one thing sisters did was text each other small, inconsequential things during the day, like photographs of dogs they had passed on the sidewalk, and he had nodded. And he had started doing that the next morning. And he had not stopped. By late July, I had a second family. I had not yet told my parents I had found them. I had not, in fact, told my parents anything. I had been quietly building a life next to the life they thought they knew about. And I had been doing it very slowly and very carefully, in the way I had learned across 4 years of casework that you build any structure intended to bear weight, which is one beam at a time. And here, in mid-August, with the second family still new and tender, the third envelope arrived. The third envelope was not from a state registry or from a biological mother. The third envelope was from a law office in Salem I had never heard of, a firm called Lindgren and Voss, and it contained, in plain professional language, a notification that I was named in an irrevocable trust established by my late grandmother, Pearl Ann Ridgway, in 2017, more than 3 years before her death, and that the trustee, a corporate trustee at a regional bank with no familial connection to anyone on either side of my family, was writing to me as the trust required on my 27th birthday, which was approaching the following March, to confirm certain particulars of the distribution schedule. The letter from Lindgren and Voss enclosed a copy of the trust's relevant operative pages. I read them at my kitchen counter, slowly, twice. The trust was structured on the face of its operative paragraphs in a way I recognized immediately because I had read trusts before, in my casework, when the financial arrangements of families that had come to the state's attention had required us to map out where the money lived. My grandmother's trust had been drafted by a careful attorney who had clearly understood his client. The trust held title to the family Cape Cod on Aldgate Lane, the one my parents had moved into within 4 months of Nana Pearl's funeral. The trust also held a portfolio of investments my grandmother had built across 40 years on the modest salary of a retired school teacher who had inherited a small mill interest from her own father in the 1970s and had managed it with the slow, patient competence of a woman who balanced her checkbook to the cent. The trust contained, the operative paragraphs informed me, a residence and maintenance provision under which my father, Lawrence Ridgway, was permitted to live in the Cape Cod with my mother and to receive a monthly maintenance distribution to cover the property's expenses until the occurrence of a triggering date. The triggering date was the 27th birthday of, quote, my granddaughter, Tessa Ann Ridgway, on which date the residence and maintenance provision terminated. The corporate trustee took possession of the property and the remainder of the trust, and the entirety of the corpus passed, free of any further encumbrance from my parents or any other person, to me. The residence and maintenance distributions to my father had been ongoing for almost 3 years by then, since shortly after my grandmother's death. They were scheduled to end on the 11th of the following March. The remainder of the trust, on that same morning, was scheduled to pass to me. I sat with the trust documents for the entire weekend. I did not call anyone. I did not, at any point that weekend, tell either Marisol or Mateo or Rosa about what had arrived in my mail, because I had not yet processed what to do with it myself, and because I had not, in our short, careful months of correspondence, ever once allowed money to enter any conversation with them. and I was not going to start. On Monday morning, I took a personal day from work. I drove to Salem. I sat in the offices of Lindgren and Voss for 2.5 hours and was walked, page by page, through the structure of the trust by a kind, exacting woman named Inga Lindgren, who had been Nana Pearl's attorney for the last 11 years of her life, and who knew the entire shape of what my grandmother had built and why. Inga Lindgren told me, in a careful, low voice that did not editorialize, that my grandmother had drafted the trust 4 years before her death, that she had revised it twice in the years since, and that the final revision, executed 9 months before she died, had been signed in this same office, in this same chair I was sitting in, by a woman who had walked in unaccompanied, paid Inga Lindgren's fee personally, and signed her name with the steady, careful hand of a woman who had thought through the consequences for a very long time. Inga Lindgren did not tell me, in so many words, why my grandmother had structured the trust the way she had. She did not have to. The structure spoke for itself. My grandmother had loved my father and trusted him very little. She had loved my mother and trusted her almost not at all. She had loved me and trusted me completely. She had designed an instrument that allowed my parents to occupy and maintain the family house during a very specific window of years, calibrated to the rough age at which my grandmother had estimated I would have completed enough of my adult life to be ready to receive what was actually mine. And the moment that window closed, the entire structure converted, automatically, into my inheritance, with no further input from anyone in the family. The will my parents had presumably been drafting and revising and arguing over with their own attorney across the years since Nana Pearl's death was, in regard to the family house and the bulk of my grandmother's estate, completely irrelevant. They had no authority to dispose of any of it. They never had. I asked Inga Lindgren, at the end of the 2.5 hours, whether my parents knew about the trust's structure. She paused. She said, very carefully, that my father had been provided with a copy of the operative document at the time of his mother's death, that her firm had no record of any subsequent communications with him on the matter, and that she could not, in her professional capacity, speculate as to what he had understood or not understood about its terms. She allowed herself, however, one small piece of editorializing on my way out of her office. She said, "Miss Ridgway, your grandmother was an unusually careful woman. She was, in my professional judgment, fully aware of every implication of the document she signed. She did not, I think, leave any of this to chance. I would encourage you, when the time comes, to keep that in mind." I drove home from Salem in the late afternoon light. I sat at my kitchen counter that evening, and I did the arithmetic of my whole childhood backwards, and I watched it rearrange into its true equation. The same way you watch a sentence in a language you almost understand suddenly resolve into a meaning you cannot unsee. The Christmas check for $200, the recital they had missed, the slow, careful tightening of the family circle around Asher and Mira and Hattie, the 75th birthday lunch I had not been invited to, the 8 months of cooling temperature in the family text thread, the expensive Thursday evening dinner reservation at Ardennes my mother had made for 2 weeks from that Thursday, the 17th of November, 4 months before my 27th birthday. My parents had a finite window in which to detach me from the family before the trust converted, and they were using it. They were trying to get me out of the family on paper before the 11th of March turned me, by Nana Pearl's quiet design, into the actual proprietor of the house they were living in. They were trying to do this, I now understood, because they hoped that if I could be made into a person whom the family had formally let go of, they might be able to contest the conversion of the trust on grounds I could not yet imagine, but which their own attorney was presumably drafting around. They had no idea I knew about the trust. They had no idea I had counsel. They were treating me, the way they had treated me my entire life, as a child to be informed of decisions, not as an adult who might already be ahead of them. I did not that evening call my parents. I did not call Asher. I did not, in the end, even call Inga Lindgren. I called Marisol. I asked her one question. I asked her whether, on the evening of the 17th of November, she might be willing to come with her mother and her son to a restaurant called Ardennes in a suburb north of Portland, to sit at a table I had reserved separately, 4 tables behind the table at which my parents were going to be sitting, and to simply be there, eating dinner, ordering quietly, while a thing happened to me at the other table that I did not yet want to face entirely alone. I told her she did not have to interact with my parents. I told her she did not even, if she did not wish to, have to look at them. I told her I simply needed to know, in the room, that the people who had wanted me from the morning I was born were 10 yards behind my mother's chair, and that when the meal at the front table was over, I could stand up and walk to their table and finish my own birthday celebration with them. Marisol did not hesitate. She said, "Tessa, we will be there. We will dress nicely. We will sit quietly. We will not look at her unless you turn around first, and then we will look at her exactly long enough for her to understand what she is looking at." She paused. She said, "Sweetheart, I have been saving a seat at every restaurant table for 26 years and not telling anyone I was saving it. I am happy to finally save one at a restaurant where the seat actually is." I made one further call the next morning to the attorney Inga Lindgren had referred me to in Portland for any defensive work that might become necessary. A woman named Halima Yusuf, who handled estate disputes at a small firm downtown. I retained her on a small, fixed monthly fee against the possibility that I would need her between November and the following March. I sent her copies of everything I had: the trust documents, the operative paragraphs, the certified letter from Lindgren and Voss, the correspondence I had received from the state registry, and a short typed timeline of the 8 months leading up to the dinner that I had assembled at my kitchen table that morning. Halima Yusuf read everything over the weekend and called me back on Monday morning. She said, "Tessa, there is nothing your parents can do between now and March that will affect your inheritance of the trust. The trust is irrevocable. The trustee is a bank. The document is clean. Whatever paperwork they wave at you at this dinner, however they describe it, do not sign it. Do not argue with them. Do not even contradict them. Sit there. Eat your dinner. Let them say what they have come to say, and then leave. If they file anything afterward, we will handle it. The strongest move you can make in that restaurant is to not give them anything they can use later." I said, "Halima, I am not going to give them anything." She said, "Good. Bring a folder anyway. Bring the trust documents. Bring my retainer letter. Bring your original birth certificate with Marisol Cardenas' name on it. Put them in a manila folder. Put the folder on the table beside your plate when you sit down. Do not open it unless you decide to open it. Just let your father see the corner of it. Your father, from what you have told me, is a man who has spent his life avoiding paperwork. The corner of a folder will do more work for you than anything you could say." I bought a manila folder. I labeled the tab in plain typed capital letters with the 4-letter abbreviation I use at work for irrevocable trusts, which is IRRV, because I knew my father would not know what those 4 letters meant, but would also not be able to stop himself from worrying about what they might mean. I put the 3 documents inside it. I closed it. I put it in the bottom of my work bag. I carried it for 2 weeks. The dinner at Ardennes was set for the 17th of November. We ordered drinks first. My mother praised the wine list at slightly excessive length, the way she did when she was killing time before launching into something rehearsed. My father told a story he had already told in the car about the parking lot. I rested my hand flat on the manila folder beside my water glass. I had not yet placed it on the linen. I had it on the seat of the chair beside me, where I could feel it, but where my parents could not yet see it. I was waiting for the moment to put it where my father could see the corner of the tab. I did not have to wait long. My mother folded her hands. She glanced at my father. She said, in the voice she used to chair her PTA meetings 25 years ago, "Tessa, Your father and I want to talk to you about something that has been on our minds for some time. We have done a great deal of thinking, and we have made some decisions about the family going forward. And we want to share them with you tonight, in person, because that is the way these things ought to be done. I said nothing. I picked up the folder and set it on the table beside my plate, label side up. My father's eyes flicked to it and held there for perhaps 2 seconds before he forced them back to my mother's face. I covered the second half of the typed label with my thumb, leaving only the 4 letters IRRV visible. I let him see them. I watched him try not to look at them again. My mother continued. She talked, in her chairwoman's voice, about how I had always been a slightly difficult fit in the family, how she did not mean that as a criticism, how each of her children had their own particular temperament, how she had always tried to be even-handed. She talked about how Asher and Mira and Hattie had become, very naturally, the center of the family's ongoing life, and how it had been increasingly difficult to find ways to include me that did not feel forced. She talked about how my father and she had been thinking lately about the future, about estate planning, about what they wanted the family to look like in their later years and after they were gone. She used the phrase, "the family to look like," 4 times in approximately 90 seconds. The 5th time she used it, she said, "And we have come to feel, Tessa, that the family going forward will look more coherent without you in it formally. We are not saying we do not love you. We are saying that the formal arrangements ought to reflect what is already true emotionally." She let that sentence settle. She watched my face. She was waiting for the collapse. The collapse, I want to be clear, did not come. I had been a children's services caseworker for 4 years. I had sat in 314 kitchens and living rooms across the state of Oregon, listening to adults explain to children why the children would not be returning home. I had taught myself, very early in that work, the small set of physical disciplines you use to keep your face neutral when an adult is doing something cruel in front of you. I deployed all of them. I set my water glass down without a sound. I folded my hands. I did not blink any more or any less than I would have at the parking lot story. My father, who had spent the entire 90 seconds staring at the manila folder, finally cleared his throat. He said, "Tessa, we have already filed the relevant paperwork to make this formal. You are removed from the will. You will not be a beneficiary of any aspect of our estate going forward. We want you to know that this was not a hasty decision. We have been planning it for several months." I let him talk. He produced from inside his suit jacket a small, slim leather portfolio, the kind a man like my father carries to important meetings. He opened it. He removed a single typed page. He turned it toward me. He slid it across the linen until it touched the edge of my plate. He uncapped a pen and placed it across the page. I did not look at the page yet. I looked at my father. I said, very quietly, "Dad, before I look at this, may I ask one question?" He said, "Of course, Tessa." I said, "Did you file under the will or under the trust?" My father's face went, very slowly, the color of paper. My mother said, "Tessa, what are you talking about? What trust?" I did not answer her. I kept my eyes on my father. He did not speak. I said, "Dad, just to be clear, did your attorney file the cutout paperwork under the will or under Nana's trust?" He swallowed. He said, in the smallest voice I had ever heard him use, "Under the will, Tessa. We filed under the will." I nodded. I said, "All right, Dad, thank you." I looked at the page in front of me. I read it in about 4 seconds, in the way I have read perhaps 2,000 pages exactly like it in the course of my professional life. It was a standard waiver and release boilerplate, drafted to look like a simple acknowledgement, in which I would, on signing, irrevocably waive any and all claim, interest, and expectancy in or against my parents' estate and any related instruments. The phrase, "any related instruments," was the operative phrase. That was the phrase that, if I had signed, would have given them grounds to argue, later, that I had waived my interest in my grandmother's trust as well, even though they had not legally been able to put it on the table. My mother had not drafted this herself. Their attorney had drafted it. Their attorney knew about the trust. My parents had been advised by a professional who had read what I had read that there was a narrow window in which my own signature on a sufficiently broad waiver might, possibly, become useful in a future dispute. They had asked their attorney to draft a document that would, if I signed it tonight, in a wounded daze, give them something to work with in March. I did not sign it. I did not push it back. I did not, in fact, touch it. I left it where my father had set it, with the pen across the top. I looked up at my mother and said, in the same neutral voice I'd used to ask my father about the filing, "Mom, may I ask another question?" She said, "Tessa, of course." She had begun to sense, I think, that the evening was not going the way she had planned. I said, "Mom, did you and Dad understand when you decided to do this, that the family house on Aldgate Lane is in an irrevocable trust, and that the trust converts to me in full on the morning of my 27th birthday?" There was a pause, approximately 3 seconds long. My mother's face did one of the more interesting things I have ever seen a face do. It did not register surprise, because my mother does not allow her face to register surprise in restaurants. It registered, instead, the slow, careful absorption of an adult woman doing the arithmetic of the last 3 years of her life backwards and arriving, very rapidly, at the correct sum. She did not say anything. She looked at my father. My father did not look at her. I said, "I am going to assume from the silence that the answer is no, that Dad knew and you did not, and that you have been operating for the last 3 years on a set of assumptions about your future that are not quite the assumptions the actual documentation supports. I am sorry that you are learning this now, at dinner, in this restaurant. I am sorry that I am the one telling you. I want you to know that I did not come here tonight to tell you. I came here tonight, when you invited me, because I was your daughter, and you had invited me out to dinner, and I had hoped, perhaps stupidly, that the dinner might be an ordinary dinner. It is not an ordinary dinner. So I am telling you the rest of it now, briefly, and then I am going to leave." I opened the manila folder. I removed the 3 documents and laid them side by side on the white linen between us. The retainer letter from Halima Yusuf, the operative pages of the trust with the relevant paragraph highlighted in pale yellow because I had highlighted it for myself 2 weeks earlier in my own kitchen. My original birth certificate with the name Marisol Cardenas in the box labeled Mother. My mother looked at the documents the way you look at the wreckage of a small car accident on the side of a road, slowly and without quite being able to look away. She did not pick any of them up. She did not need to. They were not difficult documents to read. I closed the folder. I picked up my own water, and I took a small sip and set it down. I said, "Mom, Dad, I am going to leave the trust documents on the table. The originals are with my attorney. The trust is irrevocable. The trustee is a bank. There is nothing you can do between now and the 11th of March that will affect any of it. I am telling you this not as a threat. I am telling you this so that you do not, between tonight and March, do anything desperate or expensive or embarrassing on the advice of whichever attorney drafted this waiver, which I will not be signing." I picked up the unsigned waiver, very carefully, and I tore it neatly in half along its fold, and laid the 2 halves back on top of my father's leather portfolio. I said, "Dad, please tell your attorney I said hello. Please tell him that you tried." My mother said, "Tessa, Her voice had gone unfamiliar. It was the voice I had heard her use, very rarely, when she had been caught in a small social embarrassment and was casting around for the version of the story she could tell her friends afterward. She said, "Tessa, sweetheart, we can talk about this. We can find a way to make this work. We are still your parents." She reached across the table for my hand. She had not reached for my hand at any restaurant table in my life. She had not, that I could remember, reached for my hand at any table at all, in any room, since I had been about 11 years old. I did not take her hand. I did not, in the moment, react to the hand at all. I had something else to attend to. I had begun, sometime around the moment I had asked my father which instrument they had filed under, to feel a small, steady warmth at the back of my neck. The particular warmth I had learned, over months of dinners with Marisol and Rosa and Mateo, to associate with being looked at by people who loved me and who were proud of me. The warmth was coming from 4 tables behind my mother's chair. I had not yet turned to look. I had been waiting for the right moment. The moment, I understood now, had arrived. I said, "Mom, before I go, I want to introduce you to some people." I stood up. I picked up the folder. I said, in a voice I deliberately raised, just slightly, so that it would carry to the table behind hers without being a public announcement, "Mom, please turn around." She turned around. She turned around slowly, the way you turn around when some part of you already knows what you are about to see, and the rest of you is begging it to be wrong. The cashmere of her blouse rotated, and her chin came around, and her eyes traveled across the upholstered restaurant. And they landed on table 17, 4 tables behind ours, against the south wall, beside one of the windows with the heavy wool drapes. At table 17, in the warm light of the small individual lamp, sat Marisol Cárdenas in a dark green dress and Rosa Cárdenas in a navy blue blouse with a small silver cross at her throat, and Mateo in the one button-down shirt I had ever seen him wear. They had been there since 7:15, by their reservation under my name. They had ordered a shared appetizer of fried calamari and 3 iced teas. They had eaten quietly. They had watched through every single sentence of my mother's chairwoman's speech with the careful, composed patience of 3 people who had been told in advance exactly what they were going to be witnessing and had agreed to be witnesses to it anyway. Marisol met my mother's eyes first. She did not glare. She did not smile. She simply looked at the woman who had raised her daughter on a Christmas check for $200 and a careful, slow extraction from the family text thread. And she let her face be exactly the face of a woman who had been waiting 19 years to find out what kind of person had been given her child, and had now, in the space of 8 minutes at an adjacent table in a restaurant in Oregon, found out. Rosa, beside her, had folded her napkin and placed it next to her water glass, and had clasped her 2 small hands together in her lap, the way she clasped them when she was praying, which she had been doing, I think, since the moment my mother had begun her chairwoman's voice. Mateo had set down his iced tea. He had put both palms flat on the linen, the way he had taught himself to do, he had told me once, when he wanted to keep himself from getting up too quickly. He did not get up. He waited. He had been told to wait. My mother turned back to me. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. For perhaps the first time in my entire adult life, she had no script. I said, "Mom, Dad, the woman in the green dress is Marisol Cárdenas. She gave birth to me in March of 1997 in Salem, Oregon. The woman beside her is her mother, Rosa Cárdenas. The young man is her son, my younger brother, Mateo. They have been in my life since April. They have not, in 7 months, asked me for a single thing. They have, in 7 months, sent me approximately 41 photographs of dogs they have passed on sidewalks. They are here tonight, because I invited them. They are here tonight because they are, by every measure that matters to me, my family. I wanted them to be in the room when I told you that I am leaving this restaurant now, not because of anything you have said, but because I am going to finish my dinner with them at their table, the way I have spent the last 7 months finishing my dinners with them at their kitchen table in Salem, and the way I intend, for as long as we all of us live, to keep finishing my dinners with them. I do not need anything from you. I have not, since I was about 11 years old, needed anything from you that I did not learn to provide for myself. I will not be contesting anything. I will not be filing anything. I will not be calling. I will not be writing. The trust will convert on the 11th of March. The trustee will be in touch with you, in writing, through your attorney. Halima Yusuf will be available to handle any questions you have that you do not feel comfortable putting to the trustee directly. I am very sorry, Mom, that you are learning about all of this tonight. I am very sorry, Dad, that you have known about all of this for 3 years and did not tell her. I would like, if it is at all possible, for the conversation between the two of you that begins after I walk away from this table to be a conversation neither of you raises your voice during, because there are other diners in this restaurant. Beyond that, the conversation is yours. I picked up the folder. I picked up my coat. I walked in the small hush that had begun to spread out from our table, the way a small hush spreads in an upholstered restaurant when the other diners realize they are watching something they will tell their friends about later. The 4 tables to table 17. Rosa stood up first, because Rosa does everything first. Then Marisol. Then Mateo, who knocked his knee on the table leg in his hurry, exactly the way he had knocked his knee on a different table leg the first time he had stood up to hug me, in April, in his mother's kitchen. Marisol pulled out the empty chair beside her own. I sat down in it. Mateo, across from me, said, "Hi, Tess. We saved you a seat." It was the way he greeted me every time I came over for dinner at his mother's house. He had said it to me that night on purpose, because he had wanted it to be the first sentence I heard in my new chair. Rosa, beside me, took my hand under the table. Marisol, on my other side, took my other hand. They did not look back at the front of the restaurant. They had not, at any point, taken their attention away from me long enough to look at my mother's table after she had turned around. They were not, I want to be clear, performing any of this. They were simply doing what they had done across 7 months of building a relationship from nothing, which was to give me their full and undivided attention. That was the thing my mother had not been able to do across 26 years in a single meal we had ever shared. Mateo waved at our waiter. The waiter, who I would learn later had been quietly conferring with the manager of the restaurant about the developing situation at the front table, came over with the kind, unhurried smile of a person who is very good at his job and had decided early in the evening to be on the side of table 17. Mateo said, "Can we order dinner now, please?" The waiter said, "Of course." Mateo handed me the menu I had not yet looked at and said, "Tess, get whatever you want. It is on me." He had been saving, he had told me once on the phone, $6 a week from his community college work-study job into a small envelope in the top drawer of his dresser at his mother's house for the specific purpose of one day taking his older sister to a restaurant. What happened at the front table, after I walked away from it, I learned about only later from the hostess, who is a kind young woman named Adeze, who had recognized over the course of the evening that something difficult was unfolding in her dining room and had quietly handled it the way a competent hostess handles difficulty in an upholstered restaurant, which is by becoming invisible and watching carefully. My mother, Adeze told me 3 weeks later, when I had come back to our den to write her a thank you note in person and to leave a substantial cash tip for our waiter, had sat very still for about 90 seconds after I had walked to table 17. She had not turned to look at us again. She had stared at her water glass. My father had reached across the table for her hand, and she had pulled her hand away. He had said something to her in a low voice, and she had said something back, sharper. He had stood up. He had walked out of the restaurant without paying the check. My mother had remained at the table for another 14 minutes. She had finally, Adeze said, asked for the bill, paid it on her own card without looking at it, gathered her coat and her purse, and walked out of the restaurant without looking at anyone, including, Adeze said, table 17. I had not seen any of this. I had been ordering, with great deliberation, the most expensive fish on the menu, on Mateo's $6 a week budget, because Mateo had insisted, and because I had understood, by then, that letting people who love you spend their money on you is a kindness and not a debt. I want to tell you what happened over the next 4 months, because it matters more than the dinner itself. My father texted me 3 times in the first week. The first message said, "Tessa, I am sorry." The second message, 2 days later, said, "Tessa, I would like to talk." The third message, 4 days after that, said, "Tessa, your mother is very upset. Please." I did not reply to any of them. Halima Yusuf had advised me not to. I did not need to be advised. I had spent 26 years replying to my father's small failures of courage. I was not going to reply to this one. My mother did not contact me at all. I learned later, through a cousin on the Ridgeway side who reached out to me carefully in mid-December, that my mother had told the extended family a particular version of the story, in which I had been ungrateful and theatrical and had, quote, ambushed her at a restaurant. The cousin, who was Nana Pearl's niece and who had been one of the people present at Nana's last Thanksgiving 4 years earlier, told me that very few people in the extended family had bought the version. She told me Nana Pearl had spoken about the trust to her, in confidence, 2 years before she died, and had told her that Cynthia was not to be trusted with the house, and that the only Ridgeway in 2 generations who had understood what the house actually meant was, quote, the granddaughter she was not born to. The cousin asked, very carefully, whether I would be open to staying in touch. I said yes. Asher did not contact me. I have not heard from him since. He sent me a Christmas card with no return address 2 weeks after the dinner, which I did not open and which is still on my kitchen counter 4 years later. I do not know what he wrote in it. I do not need to know. The trust converted on the 11th of March, exactly as my grandmother had structured it. The corporate trustee sent me a thick, certified envelope on the morning of my 27th birthday, containing the formal transfer documents and a single handwritten note from the senior trust officer that said, Miss Ridgeway, your grandmother spoke of you frequently in the years she was a client of this bank. She told me, on more than one occasion, that you were the most careful and honest person in her family, and that she had structured this instrument with confidence that you would steward it appropriately. We at the bank look forward to working with you. Many happy returns. I read that note twice. I framed it. It is on the wall of the small home office in the house on Aldgate Lane, where I have lived now for the better part of 4 years, because my parents had 30 days, under the trust, to vacate the property, and they vacated it. They moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment in a complex on the south side of town. Asher and Mira contributed to their first 6 months of rent. The house on Aldgate Lane was empty for 41 days. On the 42nd day, in late April, I moved in. Marisol and Rosa and Mateo helped me. Marisol drove the small rental truck. Rosa unwrapped the dishes in the kitchen and washed every single one of them by hand before she let me put them away because, she said, the dishes had been in storage and it was bad luck to use anything you had not personally washed when you moved into a new house. Mateo carried boxes for 9 hours and did not once complain. At the end of the day, we sat in the kitchen, on the floor because the chairs were not yet unpacked, and we ate a pizza Mateo had paid for out of his work-study envelope. And Rosa said grace, in Spanish, the way she did before every meal in her own kitchen. And she added at the end, in English, the sentence I want to give you to take with you into the rest of this story, which was, "Thank you for this house, and for this granddaughter, and for the long road that brought her home to it. I want to tell you what I have learned, although I am only 32 years old now, 4 years after that dinner, and I am cautious about pretending I have learned anything anyone listening needs to learn from me. I have learned that the most expensive evenings of a person's life are not usually loud. They are not usually dramatic. They are usually quiet evenings in upholstered restaurants in suburbs, organized by people who have rehearsed every line, with menus chosen for their suitability to careful conversation and napkins folded in advance. I have learned that the people who only show up at your table when there is something to be gained from being at your table have already told you, in the plainest possible language, what they are, and that all the rest of their behavior, however affectionate it sometimes appears, is footnoting that single original sentence. I have learned that the people who saved you a seat before they knew if you would ever come do not stop saving it, and that when you finally sit down in it, what you feel is not surprise that the seat is there, but a kind of slow, honest relief that the seat has always been there. I have learned that being needed is a job, and that being wanted is the absence of a job, and that the difference between the two is the difference between most of the dinners I had with my parents and every single dinner I have had with Marisol and Rosa and Mateo. I have learned that paperwork, when it is drafted by a careful woman across a long, quiet life of meaning what she says, can do, after a person dies, the kind of work that person was not able to do while she was alive. I have learned that my Nana Pearl, on the second to last day of her life, was not telling me to read her own paperwork. She was telling me to read mine. She knew by then that there was paperwork waiting for me. She knew by then that there would be a Thursday evening, some years after she was gone, when I would need it. She trusted me, by then, to find it. She was right to. I am 32 years old. I live in the family Cape Cod on Aldgate Lane. I have continued to work as a children's services caseworker, although I no longer need the salary, because the work is, I think, the work I am supposed to be doing. And because Nana Pearl, who had paid for half my undergraduate degree on a retired schoolteacher's pension, would not have wanted me to stop. I have a younger brother named Mateo, who is now 23, who graduated from his community college program 2 years ago, who is now working as a mechanical drafter at a regional engineering firm in Salem, who sends me, on average, 3 photographs of dogs a day. I have a mother named Marisol, with whom I speak on the telephone every Sunday at 4 in the afternoon, which used to be the hour I called Nana Pearl every Sunday, and which is now, by a small private decision I made 2 years ago, the hour I call Marisol, and which Marisol understands the importance of without my having ever had to explain. I have a grandmother named Rosa, who is now 80, who has taught me to bake the dense, dark bread she bakes herself, and who still lights a candle every March 11th, although what she now prays for, she has told me, has changed. There is one further thing I want to tell you before I stop. Last March, on my 31st birthday, I drove the 4 hours from Aldgate Lane out to the small cemetery in eastern Oregon where my Nana Pearl is buried, in the family plot beside her own parents and her own husband. I had not been back to her grave since the morning after her funeral. I had not, in the 4 years since the night at Ardennes, been able to figure out what I wanted to say to her when I went. I went, finally, on a clear, cold March morning, with a small bundle of late-blooming branches Rosa had cut from her own garden the morning I left, and I sat in front of Nana Pearl's small granite stone for about 40 minutes, and I did not say very much out loud. I said at one point, "Nana, I read it. I'm sorry it took me as long as it did." That was all. The wind moved through the cedars at the edge of the cemetery. I sat with her for a while longer. When I got up to leave, I put one hand on the top of her stone, the way I used to put my hand on her shoulder when she had been sitting in her kitchen and I had come up behind her. And I said, very quietly, "Nana, I belong here. The porch belongs to the house. Anyone who says otherwise is mistaken about which one of us is actually a Ridgway." I had not said the sentence out loud in 23 years, It came back to me in her exact phrasing. I drove home to Aldgate Lane. Marisol and Rosa and Mateo were waiting for me on the front porch when I pulled into the driveway, with a small cake Rosa had baked and a single tall candle pressed into the center of it, the way my mother had done with the grocery store cupcakes of my childhood. Except that this time, the candle had been put there on purpose, in love, by the woman who had been waiting 19 years to put a candle in a cake for me. And Mateo lit it for me with a small kitchen match, and I blew it out on the front porch of the house my grandmother had quietly arranged for me to inherit, with my mother and my grandmother and my brother standing on the porch with me. And I did not, at any point that afternoon, miss the woman who had spent 26 years failing to put one there. If you are listening to all of this, and any piece of it has felt close to a piece of your own life, I want you to hear one thing before I go. The people who only sit down at your table when there is something to be gained from sitting at it are not, in the end, your family. They are accountants. The accounting may be benign, the accounting may even be sincere, but it is accounting. And a person can feel the difference between being added up and being loved, even when she has spent her whole life telling herself she cannot. The first time someone sits down across from you and is not adding you up, you will feel it in your hands. You will not know what to do with your hands. That is the test. That is the only test. If your hands do not know where to go because nobody is asking them to do anything, you have found your people. Stay. Do not get up. Do not test them. Do not ask whether they are sure. They are sure. They have been sure since before you walked into the room. If your family has been treating you like a line item and you have spent a long, quiet time pretending you do not notice, I am asking you very gently to open your own paperwork. Open every drawer. Read every certificate. Register, if you are an adoptee, with whatever registry your state maintains. Make yourself findable by the people who have been quietly looking for you. The accountants will, in the end, lose interest in you, because accountants always lose interest in line items that have stopped producing income. The other people, the ones who have been saving you a seat at every table for years without telling anyone they were saving it, the ones who are still saving it tonight in some restaurant, in some town, in some part of the country you have never been to, will be there when you finally walk in. They are not going anywhere. They have already paid for the meal. They are not going to ask you for anything. They are just going to look up when you arrive and pull out the chair beside them and say what they have been waiting 26 years to say, which is the same sentence in slightly different language that the kindest people in your life have always said to you. We saved you a seat. We always did. My name is Tessa Ridgway. I am 32 years old. I am a children's services caseworker, the proprietor of a small Cape Cod on a quiet street in a suburb north of Portland, the older sister of a young mechanical drafter who sends me photographs of dogs from his lunch breaks, the daughter of a registered nurse in Salem who waited 19 years to write me a letter, the granddaughter of two women on two sides of an old decision who each, in their own way, made me an open-faced cheese sandwich on dark brown bread. I lit a candle in a kitchen 4 blocks from the house I now own on the 11th of March of this year, before I drove out to my grandmother's grave. I lit it for the woman who pressed the cupcake candle into the grocery store frosting on 26 birthdays without ever quite turning to face me while it burned. I am not angry with her anymore. I am not pretending I am not still, occasionally, sad. But the candle I light for her now, I light because she does not have the kind of family in her life that would light one for her. And somebody has to. And the seat I have always pulled out at every table I have ever set in the house on Aldgate Lane has, ever since I moved in 4 years ago, been pulled out for her, in case she ever decides to come. She has not come. I do not expect her to. I leave the seat anyway. That is the part of being wanted by the right people that the wrong people never understand. Once you have been wanted by the right people, you stop being able to withhold welcome from anyone, even from the people who taught you what withholding welcome was. The seat stays out. The kettle is on. The bread is dark and dense and on the counter. The candle is lit. The rest of my life is here, in this kitchen, at this table, with the family that has been waiting at it from the morning I was born. If someone in your life has only loved you when you were useful, I want you to take this as your sign to stop performing for a chair you have already earned somewhere else. Share this with anyone you know who is still trying to win a place at a table that has never had their name on it. Drop a comment below and tell me the one sentence the right person in your life said to you that you have never been able to forget. And subscribe, because I have more of these stories to tell, and they only travel as far as you carry them. I will see you in the next one.